There's a specific kind of sadness that comes from realizing a relationship no longer feels the way it used to. Not because of a fight, not because someone necessarily did something terrible, doesn't have to be like that, but because something changed. And maybe you can't even fully explain what it is that changed. Sometimes conversations feel shorter, energy feels different, vibes are different. There's a connection that once kind of felt really easy and effortless, doesn't work as the way that it used to. And one of the hardest parts about this kind of relationship shift is that there's often not a clear ending to grieve, right? It just kind of happens. The person's still there, but the relationship feels different. A lot of people try to talk themselves out of that feeling, right? They'll say things like, maybe I'm overthinking it, maybe that person or I am just stressed out too much, maybe this is temporary and it'll pass. And those things could be true for sure. But sometimes deep down, we already feel that there's a drift happening between me and this other person. One of the things I think we don't talk about is how quietly relationships can change. Not every relationship will explode, into a big fight or big drama. Sometimes they just simply fade away. That's very true. And that creates a real confusion um, in the grieving process of that relationship because you're not necessarily angry, you're not sad, you're not confused necessarily, but you miss something that technically still exists. And there's actually some data that supports how common this experience really is. According to the Survey Center on American Life, nearly half of Americans reported losing touch with at least a few friends in recent years. And a smaller percentage reported losing touch with most of their close friendships entirely. And it's very significant because it tells us something important. If you've experienced distance in a relationship lately, you're not alone. There's quite a few people out there that experience that. And it happens everywhere across demographics. But here's where I think a lot of people get stuck in this is that they start to force certainty, right? They replay conversations, they overanalyze tone changes, and they search for the moment when things shift. Like where was that big thing in that moment when our relationship changed or ended so abruptly? Because uncertainty, excuse me, is uncomfortable. We talked about the growth that happens in discomfort, but certainly we know that uncertainty is uncomfortable. And honestly, sometimes there isn't just one defining moment, like I've said. It doesn't just explode all the time. Sometimes people just evolve differently. One person grows inward, one person becomes busier, priorities change. Maybe there was a healing part of that relationship that you had with that person, and maybe that healing has occurred, and maybe that relationship then just changes and isn't necessary anymore. Or maybe one person just avoids difficult conversations, which is something else that we've talked about in the past. And eventually, the rhythm between the two people changes. Another study found something also that I find pretty interesting is that back in 1990, about a third of Americans reported having 10 or more close friends. By 2021, that number dropped dramatically. When you think about that for just a second, we are more digitally connected than ever before, but still we feel relationally thinner than we used to. And I think that matters quite a bit because when relationships start changing, people often assume that it's got to be me. I must have done something wrong, or something wrong happened entirely, which maybe there was no wrong that occurred. But some of this is larger than any one relationship. People are often overwhelmed, distracted, or emotionally exhausted, and that connection can sometimes feel harder to maintain. But still, that doesn't make the grief any less real. One of the hardest truths about relationships is this, I'm going to lay it on you. Not every relationship is meant to grow in the same direction forever. It's just not. That doesn't mean that the memories that you experienced are fake. It doesn't mean that the relationship was meaningless. It just means that people change, and sometimes they change together, sometimes they don't. This next statistic honestly hit me pretty hard when I was researching this topic. In 2003, Americans spent around an hour a day in person with their friends. By 2020, that number dropped around 20 minutes. 20 minutes. And when you think about that, it actually makes sense why relationships can slowly weaken. Relationships need shared meaning, they need shared life, they need shared experiences, presence, and moments. And sometimes relationships don't dramatically break. Sometimes they just slowly lack and they wither away because of lack of time, attention, emotional presence, all those things. Now, I want to say something important here as it relates to this. Not every changing relationship needs rescue, and not every drifting relationship means that you failed. Sometimes relationships are seasonal. Sometimes people were meant for a specific chapter of your life. And sometimes the healthiest thing that we can do is stop trying to force relationships to stay exactly as they once were. But I also think that clarity matters. So if a relationship means it matters deeply to you, then have the conversation. Ask the question. Express what you're noticing. Don't be aggressive about it. Don't be dramatic about it. Just honesty. Honest, forthright. This is what I'm noticing in our relationship, and my noticing, or is what I'm noticing valid? And are you noticing the same things? Because really, unresolved ambiguity keeps people emotionally stuck in relationships in all manner of situations. And even difficult clarity is often healthier than endless confusion. I think one of the most mature things we can learn in this life is you can deeply appreciate what a relationship once was, while also accepting that it may not feel the same anymore. Both things can be true. And if you're grieving a changing relationship right now, I want you to know that your sadness makes sense. And humans are wired for connections. So when connections change, we feel it deeply and we grieve for that loss of that connection. But relationships changing does not mean you are unlovable. It does not mean that you failed. And it doesn't erase the value of what that relationship really meant to you and what it gave to you one time. Some people grow together, some people grow differently, and neither reality makes you feel invalid or should make you feel invalid. If this resonated with you, which I hope you did, feel free to share it with somebody who you think might need it. By now, you should see the link to connect with me via email for your coaching ideas or questions. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. And you guys just have a powerful day.